Tyrion Lannister is one of, if not the most iconic character to come out of A Song of Ice and Fire and Game of Thrones. I believe he has the most chapters out of any viewpoint character with a total of 37. He appears in 4 of the 5 books, only not appearing in Feast, his exclusion from that book being a big point of pain for a lot of readers. But he's gotten up to a lot in the recent past of A Song of Ice and Fire. So today I'm going to go over his journey in the most recent book, A Dance with Dragons, and discuss my theories as to his future in the Winds of Winter. This is Winter is Coming, the series where I recap the most recent Song of Ice and Fire books and get you prepared for the next in the series. I'm Quinn the GM, and if you enjoy, be sure to like and subscribe. Thank you. It is worth noting before we get in that he's a bit of a teacher's pet, Tyrion. George Martin has said that that is his favorite character to write for out of all of them, and it very much shows given the very high number of viewpoint chapters he has. This is no better shown anywhere than A Dance with Dragons, in which he has 12 chapters. He has more chapters in A Dance with Dragons than the Dragon Queen has in A Dance with Dragons. Tyrion has 12 chapters therein, and I like to divide them into acts of three chapters for a single kind of mini story arc for Tyrion. The first of these being adjusting to his new situation in Essos, the second being journeying with Griffin, young Griff, the third being Jorah's prisoner, and the fourth being a slave around Marine. I should ask, now that I'm done with the Lannisters, who do you want to see me cover next in this series? I'd love to continue prepping you for the Winds of Winter, and I'm very excited to just talk about more characters. This is a very fun story. If you want to see more of this series, be sure to like and subscribe, as it really helps me, the channel, and the videos. The first leg of Tyrion's story in A Dance with Dragons mostly deals with the past and getting his legs under him with the new order of things. Tyrion can no longer command the wealth or power of House Lannister, as he's been exiled by way of escaping the headsman. He was bound for death after Oberyn Martell died in his trial by combat, as he was going to be killed for supposedly murdering his nephew, King Joffrey. Jaime and Varys helped him escape, and in doing so, Jaime essentially reminded Tyrion of his first wife, Tysha, and told Tyrion a big confession that was omitted from the show, that being that Tysha genuinely loved him and was not a paid prostitute, as Tywin had forced Jaime to tell his brother. So this very much influences Tyrion's arc. It sends him to a very dark place that results in him murdering Shay and then his father. And this entire first part of his arc deals with that, coming to terms with who he is, whether or not he even wants to live, and figuring out what he's going to do now. He's shipped to the manse of Illyrio Mopatis, a very wealthy cheese merchant from Pentos, which is also where we started out Daenerys' story in A Game of Thrones, showing that both characters are kind of beginning their journey at a similar low place. Illyrio and Tyrion then travel eastward to Essos. I know my directions. And in that time, Illyrio explains that he plans on sending Tyrion to the Dragon Queen to act as an advisor, and he thinks that for killing Tywin, Daenerys will be quite grateful. The second leg of Tyrion's journey is personally my favorite, and it's not just biased because my favorite character in the entire series is involved. Tyrion is then dropped off at daycare by Illyrio, where he meets two men, Halden Halfmaester and Raleigh Duckfield. These two are sworn to a group that is also traveling eastward towards Daenerys with the hopes of pursuing some secret goal. Tyrion puzzles out what exactly that secret goal is. It turns out the leader of this troop, Griff, is none other than the best character in the series, Lord Jon Connington, who's attempting to marry Aegon Targaryen, also called Young Griff, to Daenerys, uniting their claims and essentially bringing them both back to Westeros. Aegon is supposedly the son of Rhaegar Targaryen, and this gives him an even better claim to the throne than Daenerys, but Daenerys has dragons. During this journey, they are set upon by stone men. Tyrion is knocked into the water, but saved by Jon Connington, despite Connington getting grayscale in the process. And they continue along to the point that Tyrion eventually ends up trying to convince Aegon that this is a bad plan. Tyrion instead plants a seed that Aegon should go west instead of east. He should arrive in Westeros before his aunt and claim the throne for himself, so she has to come to him. This seems like an insane plan, and Tyrion doesn't think it's going to work, but somehow Jon and Aegon buy it, and they go west, while Tyrion is kidnapped by Jorah and continues east. The next portion of the journey follows a similar trajectory, though with a different dynamic. Jorah is now Tyrion's captor, and the two of them go through Volantis and then eventually further eastward in order to try to meet with Daenerys. Jorah is out of favor with her, seeing as he was exiled for informing on her to Varys, and because of this, he is attempting to kind of regain her loyalty and love by presenting her with this prize, this Lion of Lannister, who she can execute because his brother killed her father, and his father was very mean to her father. That was a confusing web, but I navigated it, and I'm proud of myself. With that said, on this journey, they meet a number of interesting characters, none of whom are in the show. Most notably, Penny, who is another dwarf. She has very much a good reason to hate Tyrion at first. She had a brother who was killed because Cersei put out a bounty on Tyrion's head, and a bunch of people who were like Tyrion were killed in order to hopefully claim this bounty, including Penny's brother. But eventually they end up kind of bonding, and it ends up being a bit of a ray of sunshine in a very dark Tyrion story. She kind of pulls him back from the brink at multiple points when his mental health is in a very dark spot from, the fratricide and the killing of the Shay and all that. He also meets a guy named Makoro, a red priest with these flame tattoos all over his face, who spouts some prophecies and then promptly gets carried off by a storm to meet up with Victarion. However, at the end of this sort of series of events, Tyrion's ship is stranded in the middle of the ocean, and him, Jorah, and Penny are picked up by slavers. The last part of Tyrion's arc is probably my least favorite in the book. It is him being essentially sold as a slave and marine. He fights in the fighting pits for Daenerys. However, unlike the show, the two don't meet at that point. He just fights and then retreats, and then she flies off on Drogon. Nothing else much happens. During that time, Tyrion is sold to a man named Yezen Zoquagaz, also called the Yellow Whale, probably the fattest character in the entire series. He ends up dying of a disease. Also, Tyrion's other captor, named Nurse, is poisoned by mushrooms that Tyrion got from Illyrio's manse, and eventually Tyrion ends up making his way to Ben Plum and the Second Sons. He then kind of signs a contract with them and is able to kind of become a sellsword instead of a slave. So he's able to work his way out of that reasonably quickly, though mostly due to luck and the people around him dying. We do know more about Tyrion's story in The Winds of Winter than most. We actually have two of his sample chapters, and it's a little interesting what chapters we have from him. We've heard both Tyrion 1 and Tyrion 2, but we haven't heard all of both. Tyrion 1 was read at a convention a couple times, and because of this, we have some fan accounts of it, but we don't have any actual text, or what was actual text before Martin edited it. Tyrion 2, on the other hand, came out on the World of Ice and Fire app in the US. This means that we had the full text for Tyrion's second chapter in Winds, but not his first. It's pretty interesting and a weird situation. And it means that we're further along in Tyrion's story, at least in terms of released chapters, than we are any other character in the Winds of Winter. That said, we see a chapter that is very similar to Tyrion's first chapter in Winds, if the descriptions of the reading at the cons are correct. That being Tyrion playing Syvass with Ben Plum and attempting to convince him to go back to Daenerys. This gambit ends up succeeding, and Ben and Jorah and Tyrion flip back to Daenerys' side in the Battle of Fire, just in time for the Ironborn to arrive and shift the tides of battle. Before we get into speculation, it's important to note that we have one other definitive detail about Tyrion that we have for no other characters in terms of the Winds of Winter at this moment. We know for a fact that Tyrion's story in the Winds of Winter is complete. In an interview on Stephen Colbert in October of 2022, right after House of the Dragon Season 2 finished, he said he was done with Tyrion's story. He didn't say if he was done with anyone else's, but he did very specifically say that he was done with Tyrion's. I think this is a great thing. Tyrion is around a lot of other viewpoint characters, and him being done means that likely at least Martin had some idea of how all of those other characters were going to end, those being Victarion, Dany, and Barristan. All of these are important characters, and all of them are very tied into Tyrion's story going forward. Additionally, Tyrion, being Martin's favorite character to write, always has a ton of chapters, so him being done with Tyrion is a lot more significant to me than him saying he's done with, like, say, Areo Hotah, who's probably only going to have like 2 or 3 chapters, if that. Tyrion in the Winds of Winter is very interesting. His entire arc throughout A Dance with Dragons is him kind of sliding into villainy. He's been cast in this role by the entirety of Westeros, being the Kingslayer, the Kinslayer, and he is kind of allowing this evil to become him. He starts off the book really not knowing if he wants to live or die, and he ends the book with a pretty emphatic decision towards living. However, his idea of living tends to be one of inflicting harm on those around him. At this this point, he is in the middle of a very chaotic situation. The Battle of Fire is a big uncertainty, and it's completely unclear who's going to come out alive, who's going to come out dead. If I had to guess, Barristan will die, Victarion will survive, Tyrion will, of course, survive because Martin loves him. I think that in the aftermath of this battle, no one is going to be in a better position than Tyrion Lannister. As a wise man once said, chaos is a ladder, and I think Tyrion is about to climb. Without Daenerys, Meereen is currently one big power vacuum. Barristan installed a council of rulers, but with his own absence, it seems like this council is going to be overruled quite quickly. Most likely by the Shave Pate, who's someone who had manipulated Barristan in the past and is going to likely take drastic actions against the Masters as soon as he possibly can. Probably as soon as Barristan is either dead or out of the city. Or both, we'll see. That said, Shave Pate's actions are likely going to make him quite unpopular with both the ruling council and the members of Meereen's populace as a whole. So I think that Tyrion is in a prime position to come in and be a much more moderate voice than the Shave Pate. Additionally, being both an unknown person and someone who's very much played the Game of Thrones before, I think that he's set up to be a very, very strong player here. I think that he also has a good tendency to manipulate people, especially those who are actually less intelligent than himself. He does tend to think of people as less intelligent than himself, even if that's not true. But I think in terms of the people in Meereen, he is one of the smartest people around. And I think that especially if Barristan is dead, given that Barristan doesn't really like Tyrion, he can absolutely control that situation. There are also some characters I could see Tyrion getting along with really well in Daenerys' camp. I think that if Victarion and Tyrion are around each other, they will either hate each other or Tyrion is going to adopt Victarion as a second Braun and just point him at whatever problems he wants solving as an admiral. I think that'd be a really fun dynamic, and I do personally think that we'll see both Victarion and Tyrion take Casterly Rock in the Winds of Winter, as we've seen a blog post from Martin coming, I think it was Christmas of 2022 or 2023, I think it was 2022, where he went into immense detail on Casterly Rock and specifically focused on its naval defenses, which makes me think that Daenerys will attack it from the sea, as I think she did in the show as well. Tyrion knows the sewers of Casterly Rock, and Victarion is most likely going to be not Victarion, Daenerys' admiral going forward. So I could see her sending the two of them off to do this mission together, which would be a hilarious and really fun dynamic that I would love to see in Winds. Other than interacting with the Titan's brother, I could see Tyrion striking up quite a rapport with Marwyn the Mage. Marwyn is currently headed directly for Dany, and he is someone who's going to likely be a very important influence on her, having all of this knowledge of Westeros, and additionally being this massive conspiracy theorist, and both of these things seem to apply a lot to Tyrion. Tyrion is someone who wants to cause chaos, wants to accumulate knowledge, and Marwyn is kind of a perfect way to do both of those things. With that said, I think the most important dynamic for Tyrion in the Winds of Winter is going to be Daenerys by far. I doubt the two of them will meet until about 3 or 4 viewpoint chapters into either of their stories, given the fact that Daenerys is currently off in the Dothraki Sea, and the Battle of Fire is currently raging in Meereen. I think we'll get at least one chapter of Tyrion there alone, kind of consolidating power and making things a bit neater for Daenerys when she comes back, so she has reason to not just kill him on sight. But I do think that Tyrion is very much poised to be the devil on Daenerys' shoulder. We see her in her final chapter kind of embracing the Targaryen fire and blood. I'm going to get more into this in the video for this series on Daenerys, but overall I think that the two of them are going to just kind of encourage each of each other's worst instincts and kind of be Tywin and Aerys reborn, albeit I think that Tyrion might be a bit more capable in terms of manipulating someone rather than Tywin, who ended up getting hated after doing it for too long. The one thing I don't see Tyrion doing in the Winds of Winter is reuniting with his siblings. I think that if that happens, it is going to be saved for Dream of Spring, and I think that his siblings, or him, more likely his siblings, are going to die very soon thereafter. I think that that's something that really the geographic issues of this narrative don't allow right now. Jaime is missing in the Riverlands, Cersei's a prisoner in King's Landing, and Tyrion is on the other side of the world fighting with sellswords. So overall, getting those chess pieces together in this book really don't make sense to me. I think that Daenerys will probably take Dragonstone and begin her attacks on Westeros, but any meetings with Cersei or Jaime are unlikely to happen, unless, of course, Cersei is at Casterly Rock. I could see Tyrion's final chapter of the book being a meeting with Cersei at Casterly Rock. I could see that being a very fitting final chapter for the two of them. I'd really like that, actually. I just had that idea as I'm saying this, so hopefully it happens. Overall, Tyrion Lannister is poised to be an incredibly influential figure in the Winds of Winter. He is a character who always gets a ton of chapters, and we know for a fact that those chapters are done. He is going to steer himself, Daenerys, and Westeros in a very dark direction, and I, for one, am very excited to see it. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe. I'd really appreciate it. Really helps the channel, really helps the video, really helps everything, and it just makes me feel good. If you enjoy A Song of Ice and Fire content, I have a ton of more of it on the channel, if that's not redundant, which I'm sure it is. And I'll be back with more videos in this series, in other series, and about House of the Dragon in the very near future. I actually have a theory on House of the Dragon that'll be coming out at some point soon. I'm not sure when. It's recorded, it's not edited. We'll see. That said, I hope you enjoyed. I'll see you soon. Goodbye.